Okay, this is just the compost when it's actually been riddled. That's the condition that you find it in. It just looks like earth. It's quite, if good compost, if you squeeze it and it holds its form, which that's doing, that's enough moisture but not too much. If it's muddy and the water's dripping out it, it's too much, okay? Now, you've pretty much seen the process now, starting with the waste being delivered, the waste being sort of shredded, then it's obviously turned. You've seen that. You've seen the riddler when it's being riddled, and then you see it, you know, you obviously won't see the testing today, but we actually test for temperature every day for the first 8 weeks, and then after that it's every week we test. So we're testing to make sure that the temperature's enough to kill off all the pathogens and bacteria, okay? The bad bacteria, I should say. And we've actually amalgamated 2 windows because when they're actually rotten, you lose about 50% of the weight and more than 50% of the volume. So at a certain stage, it's more economical just to mix the 2. So we would take that one. That one will be tested probably about 9 months. So it'll be July, August, September. You're talking maybe sort of March, April time. We'll be testing that window to see if it's suitable for compost. See the estuary goes out and then you're actually heading up to Perth along there. Okay.
A lot of landfill sites seem to be at quite picturesque locations. Like, do you reckon that's because they're usually at the outskirts of towns and sort of raised areas?
Well, originally this was the outskirts of the town, and all the rich houses were built there. Anybody that knows Dundee, you'll know that there's the Law is the hill in Dundee. It's an old extinct volcano, but there's another hill. It's that one up there called Balgay Hill, and it's actually got an observatory on it. So if you ever fancy going up one night, you can perfect. Excellent. So, the other thing from there is you get a good view of the composting site, seeing what's going on. The wee project that you see there is a job we're doing with SCRI to see the growth of different composts, different mixes. In the summer it looked superb, now it's looking a bit sort of less superb. But there's a lot of good scientific information come from that. Scottish Crop Research Institute's just in Invergowrie, so just across there.
Well, what would you suggest not using that on like a vegetable garden, like a home vegetable garden, or just because like of contamination?
No, I don't think there's any harm in that. There's no regulations against it. The chances of someone, when you look at the probability of something happening from there being food waste and green waste, there's very little proof and very little evidence. But the point is, they're looking for zero risk, and that's exactly what we do. If you're doing that at home, that's okay. The only trouble is if you put meat waste in, if you put fish waste in to an open window, you're going to attract rats, and that's the problem. That's the other reason that we don't really want meat wastes in and that, because you just attract loads and loads of rats, and the population are... Well, maybe stand off this road because there's cars coming and things.
Shall we stand over here?
How people are expected now. You're not only just to dump your waste, you're expected to separate it into various different materials and that. Would you like that, Jarrod?
Yeah.
You want to see that? That's about the last thing I think I can show you here. Starting here, obviously, we've got the waste paper. We've got obviously PET and HDPE. That's HDPE, the milk bottles, and PET is the Coca-Cola bottles. Aluminium cans. And basically this is clothing and textile banks. They tend to get shoe banks now. We sell the material to a company called Nathan's. Nathan's actually take pairs of shoes and they sell them on to Africa in bulk. If they get single shoes, they sell them to India, and there's a man in India takes shoes from all over the world and tries to match them as closely as possible.
That's so lovely.
So it means that everything gets used. We've now got, we're trying to push recycling books more. Again, they get sold to Africa by the bale, and a lot of the charity shops will only take really good, maybe current kind of books. but they try and sell, you know, all the books to Africa and that. And then obviously you've got the different coloured glasses, 3 glasses, clear, green and brown, or amber as they call it. Have a look in here, you'll see all the televisions. A lot of these TVs are just old TVs. They're probably in working order, but people want flat screens now and they want all the different aspects to it. So that's another thing that you'll see in there. There's some nice big televisions.
And what happens with them?
They go to a company in Perth called Viridor, and they recycle it. They break it up. All the metal comes out, all the glass comes out, all the plastic comes out, and it's recycled.
So they don't ever take a working TV set and...
No, there's other companies that do that on their behalf, but most of the material gets just turned back into material. There are 1 or 2 people that actually take the TVs and sell them.
Do they pay for that, or do they get paid for that?
No, because of the cost of treating it, they actually take it free from us. And most of the councils in Scotland are like that. They do it on that basis. You work with a compliance company called Valpak. So we actually reuse. The more you go and do something like you recycle it, you've got to put energy in to make it into something else. For instance, if you want all the plastic out, you've got to chop it up, then you've got to be able to segregate all the plastic. That takes energy in itself. So the argument is, if something's working, don't throw it out, just pass it on to the next person that's going to use it.
It costs money to recycle, doesn't
Yes,
it?
it does.
So do you have to get over a certain amount before it starts to pay off, you know? And then,
if you think of all the different bits and pieces probably in that bit of equipment, look, all the different wires and the diodes that are working fine.
So like you say, like starting with such a small amount and probably assuming that it was going to stay, I mean obviously sort of get bigger within those sections, but I had to sort of change the way it's done and change the way they do things based on, not necessarily fashion, but based on sort of what people buy and how things change in that respect. I thought it was quite interesting.
I mean, do you think that when you start getting into recycling and you've previously not really been that bothered about it, then do you think that there's a possibility to get quite excited about it and start looking at products that you're purchasing in a way of how to recycle them, or how to or what could I do with this, or how could I? There's a family that was on the news quite recently. I think they managed to include all their rubbish from the year in one carrier bag, like in one Tesco bag, just because they buy stuff in a certain way, you know, and then reuse it in a certain way, and it does dictate what you can consume to a certain extent, but after a bit of experience in that, you can kind of work around it. But yeah, well, I mean, once you get into it, you know, like you start seeing a product from a start point and an end point, and where it's going to end up, you know. And it's
or just to actually, I wouldn't say it's the whole thing. You see a certain frame, because then there's like, where will this compost go, you know, and how many people could this compost feed?